online live, AmericanFreedomRadio.com. Get Kathleen Wynne rocking out here in the studio. Her website is handcountedpaperballots.org. And Bev Harris is with us from blackboxvoting.org. Bev, what'd you think of that?
Oh, I thought it was wonderful. He addressed so many of the issues that we're dealing with so concisely and articulately. I think it's the interview itself, and I thank you, Jack, for doing this. I think the interview itself is going to be very useful in moving the message to the next level.
Well, we're very honored to be a part of it, and when Kathleen wrote me and Vicki Karp from VoteRescue.org brought this to my attention, I was thrilled to be able to do this and help facilitate the interview and help get this out to as many people as possible. Kathleen, we were just talking in the studio here off air about one of the problems we face in this country, and I hate to say this, but a lot of Americans are distracted, they're dumbed down, they can't understand technical issues, or they can't understand all the small print involved in these electronic votings, which you would think would be why they would reject it wholesale. But Kathleen, I mean, how do we bake this down and make it simple for all Americans to understand? Maybe they don't need to know the political process in arriving at the conclusions that the Germans just have, but they at least need to understand what rights, what human rights, what constitutional rights are being taken from them in this process of voting. When they say, as you just mentioned, vote the suckers out, it can be kind of hard to do when they're controlling, who counts the votes. Kathleen?
Well, yeah, I've always felt the thing that bothered me when working with Bev at Black Box Voting, when we saw how these machines worked and how easily they could be controlled by unknown people, I knew then this isn't going to work. This isn't what a democracy looks like. And what the American people, I think, need to come to terms with is the reality that democracy cannot survive on its own, just as Dr. Wiesner said. We have to fight for it every day. And what we've done, and Bev has said this too, is given away our power, because the only power we have as citizens is the ballot box. If we make that secret and someone else controls it, we really don't know who got into office is legitimate and who isn't. Are we willing to give that up and expect to maintain our freedoms at the same time? I mean, you got to do what Germany did and protect your democracy. If they can do it, how can the supposedly greatest democracy in the world not? I mean, we're the ones that demanded that they have human rights and inalienable rights in their Constitution after World War II. And now we're not protecting our own human rights here in this country. That is, to me, appalling. And everybody, why we didn't take to the streets like Iran is beyond me.
Well, I think that day is coming. Bev, what about this hypocrisy? We've got the Obama administration coming out and saying that we must protect our computer grids from foreign hackers. I hear allegedly they have the Electronic or the E-Patriot Act already written for when the big electronic terrorist event happens. Yet nobody really talks about that and that hypocrisy, but also something else very important. I mean, we're talking about locals stealing our local and national and statewide elections, but what if the Chinese came in and hacked for their particular candidate? I mean, this has the threat of foreign tinkering here that could really mess up our political elections as well. You would think that the so-called politicians would be more concerned about that.
Yes, in fact, when Black Box Voting did its research in Utah with our second Hursty hack, one of the things that was really scary was he found a tunnel into the system, and then he actually found on a Chinese website some instructions which were very similar and potentially could have been, who knows, could have been used. It's all of the above. Bottom line is, with computerized vote counting, what the public has done is we've transferred control to insiders, and we've transferred control to anybody outside who's clever enough to get inside. But it's a transfer of power. It is no longer democratic elections. I know people can quibble about whether we're a republic or a democracy or whatever, but we can refer to democratic elections. They are not democratic elections. They're not public elections if they're controlled by insiders or by those who can break into it. It has to be public. That's the key concept we have to keep in mind. And, Kathleen mentioned it's a human right. the argumentation for the fact that it's a human right is actually very simple. In the Declaration of Independence, it talks about certain inalienable rights that are endowed by our Creator. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, liberty, I've never seen an argument that you have liberty if you don't have public elections. If the public doesn't control its own government, you don't have liberty. So liberty is our inalienable right, endowed by our Creator, meaning that you can't pass a law, you can't pass a valid law to take away someone's liberty. You can pass a law to have slavery, but it's not a valid law under our system of government.
Yeah, the Ninth Amendment in the Bill of Rights says exactly that. But to quote Benjamin Franklin, democracy is two wolves and a lamb deciding what to have for lunch.
One of my favorite quotes, yes. The founders I have my book, Black Box Voting, which has actually become quite outdated now, but it's free online. And one of the chapters, I think it's chapter 6 or 5, has a lot of the quotes of the founding fathers and how they apply to this situation. They would have been appalled. We have transferred our power. We have, it says, vigilance, the price of democracy is eternal vigilance. We became not vigilant. And one last thing I'd like to say is the American public has, maybe dumbed down, but I think they're really very clever. But they want the quick solution. They want the quick fix.
Yeah.
I constantly hear people say, oh, what's the solution? And they just think that if you just pass a law. Well, guess what, folks? I've been out in the field for 6 years now, and the laws that are on the books aren't followed. So how is passing another law going to help? We have to look at this as fighting for our human rights and not just expect that someone else is going to do it for us, and not just think it's going to be you wave a magic wand and all is well again. We actually have to be willing to look.
Let me ask this, to both of you ladies, where are we now? We have a big election coming up. I'm seeing a series of what they call money bombs to fund these liberty candidates around the country, such as Rand Paul, or locally here, Deborah Medina or Adam Kokesh. Just a long list of great candidates who, by the way, don't need as much money as the lying candidates because they don't have to pay to cover up all their lies, repeating things over and over again and buying mainstream media to do that. But let me go to you first, Bev, and then to you, Kathleen. Where are we now heading into the 2010 elections on the issue of electronic voting, and what needs to be done specifically, and how can we help?
Well, probably we're worse than we were before. People don't want to hear that. They say, oh, we got paper trails in some states. What we've done now is we've made it more electronic, more database-driven, and we've put more components of the election, more crucial parts of the election out of public view. For example, these vast new voter registration databases are very vulnerable to all kinds of things, such as substitution of voters who are completely fictitious. They've added internet voting registration in 9 states now, which means basically you can have the voter list stuffed with all kinds of non-existent people if you register them on the internet. There are reasons, for example, when you start a bank account or a stock brokerage account, that you have to show up in person. You can't just, do something on the internet. Who knows who that person is? So I would say that electronically and in terms of concealed processes, we're going in worse than before.